We're going to have about a 30-minute interview with Ollie Jones. He's the Director of Practical Effects at LAIKA. And our moderator tonight is Mary Luz, who you might know. She's a meteorologist, reporter, and anchor from Point 6.
At the time, because this, we had seen, yes, of course, other stop-motion animated films. 1993, Nightmare Before Christmas. We go to 2000, we're doing Chicken Run. But LAIKA was really taking a chance, being this little studio that could, in a way, at that time.
So when I got the call to work on, and they said the name of the movie is going to be called Coraline, it's going to be the studio called LAIKA, and I hadn't heard of either one. So I was like, well, that sounds exciting. Where is it? They said Portland. I went, oh, great, the northeast of America, because I don't think I'd even heard of Portland at the time. And so I was like, okay, this sounds exciting. Let's just go and find out. And yeah, and we got here, and it was like just this kind of small studio that just had this huge ambition to just make this just enormous stop motion movie. Stop motion is supposed to be, it's supposed to be like for kids' TV shows. It doesn't scale to these giant hangars of what now LAIKA is. So it was just super exciting just to walk into a place with such big and grand visions for stop motion and for this movie. It was just incredible.
So you knew the movie was going to be called Coraline. You saw those first few little snippets of it. Talk to us a little bit about the story as it developed and what you first did on it.
So we had the first and second act when we were there, and so we got to learn that. And the way it works in stop motion, it's all about planning, right? So you can't improvise that much. There's little opportunities here and there, but it's all about planning. So we got into look development. We got into developing a lot of the characters. Some of the puppets were kind of available. So we started to break down sequences, started to learn about things. Foggy third act as well. So we kind of we don't know exactly what's coming here. So we kind of know the temperament of the movie, but we don't quite know. And that's kind of how the movie's developing, right? There's this kind of unknown towards the end. So that's how it felt like when we were making it. And so we start, development. I think the first thing I worked on was, I should actually ask, has everybody seen the movie? Yeah?
Pretty much.
Has anybody seen the movie for the first time tonight?
Yes.
Oh, good, you're in for a treat.
Hey!
Because I'm just about to do some spoilers, so I'm only going to ruin it for two people. So there's a sequence where the world starts to disintegrate. And so one of the first things that I did was build a tree out of plasticine, and I hung it upside down and put a hairdryer on it and just started melting the trees on camera and then turning the footage upside down so it looked like the melting was moving towards the sky. And so I was like, this is pretty cool. Right? So that was one of the first things that we did. And I remember the shoot itself, sometimes it just takes a long time to start getting assets. They want seconds in the bag. But there's it's hard to make puppets, it takes a long time. So they started giving us hands. I think the first shot that we started with was it was just a hand, maybe a picture frame or something. It was Coraline's hand, it was a real close-up. And that's how we started. And it just started rolling from there and just building momentum.
So for those three people in the audience who don't know the film, can you give us a little synopsis?
So I guess, from the twisted mind of Neil Gaiman and Henry Selick, this kind of warped fantasy about this little girl called Coraline Jones. She kind of moves to a new house and she finds this tiny little door, and within this door is a kind of parallel universe, this kind of alternative perfect life, where she has the perfect parents and the perfect friends and this kind of incredible garden. And so it's kind of a story about the grass is always greener, or kind of maybe be careful what you wish for kind of a thing. But we kind of start to learn she has to become, she has to overcome things, she has to become stronger, she has to rely on herself to defeat what is kind of an evil version So there's kind of like a morality in there as well.
Talk to us a little bit about I'm sure that most of the folks here know what stop motion animation is, but we've got her right here. And just explain briefly, if you can, what stop motion animation is, what it entails.
So stop motion animation is kind of one of the oldest art forms in the film world. It's been going ever since we've had celluloid. It's basically the movement of objects a frame at a time, taking picture, and each picture, as you put them next to each other, gives the illusion of motion. And so our films are no real difference. We have a lot of technical advances, but there's no real difference between what we have done and what maybe something like King Kong in the 1930s was doing, or even before that. It's kind of like a big projected flip book. Like when you just take a flip book and you go, and you see all those pictures moving, that's kind of what's happening on the screen.
That's a good explanation for sure. So here she is standing here in front of us. And,
Thirsty.
Coraline and all of your other films.
No, not me. He
Each
keeps
one
drinking.
is, though, completely handmade from the ground up, which is still just stunning to me when I think about all of the work that goes into it. I'm guessing she's just a maquette, right?
No, it's a real puppet.
Oh, she is a real
Yeah.
puppet. Okay.
Yeah, watch this.
Yeah. There.
Yes.
So, but explain what is underneath all of that, because there's a lot that goes into just even her base skeleton.
Yeah, so at the core of the puppet is something called an armature. That's a steel kind of skeleton. It's made out of ball joints and swivels and hinges, and they're all tensionable, so she can hold poses. So the animators will use their hands to kind of move. I'm going to ruin her pose, and some animator out there is going to be really angry with me. But the animator can come along and they can take her and they can move her a frame at a time, knowing that the skeleton inside is completely tensionable and will hold its pose. After that, she has a silicone skin, and so we put the skeleton in a mold. We pour silicone around it, and then after that, she has tiny little paws. We have really talented costume department who can make things to scale, and then we have a hair department and we have a face department. So it's kind of like a miniaturized film studio, just making very small things.
Very small things, for sure. So do you know offhand how many puppets were created for this?
A lot.
I have heard that it's 250 individual armature puppets, which is a lot.
That is a lot. How long does it take to make each one?
Well, a Coraline, which is kind of what we call, it's a first up or a unique character. It's one of our hero characters, obviously, for this movie, but any one of our hero characters will take anywhere between 9 months and a year. And then after that, we have something called dupes, which are just copies, which take between about 3 and 4 months. So because of the process takes such a long time, we are making many versions of each character. So I think for Coraline, there was like 28 versions of her, and then we can have them all spread out in the studio and be shooting different shots and different scenes simultaneously, and that's how we kind of make up our time, because the process is so slow.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about some of the innovations that were used in Coraline, because this was kind of the first big foray, so there were some things that made it easier, I guess, or not.
I think easier, we've stopped saying easier.
Okay.
We've kind of that's become like a little bit of a folly for us, because we go, this will speed it up, this will make it easier, and really makes it better, and we just take just as long to do it. So, but this is, so for Coraline, there was like 2 real major advances that were happening. The faces prior to Coraline were kind of predominantly silicon with armature. So just like what I was just saying about the body has like an armature in it still, that's what faces used to be. So faces would be armatures, there'll be like little paddles around the mouth, there'll be paddles in the eyebrows, there'll be paddles in the cheeks, and that's how we used to get all the kind of facial animation. But for Coraline, we started to use something called rapid prototyping, which is a kind of like, in this version, it's like an inkjet printer, which is laying down multiple layers of, in this case, resin, and then we're using UV to set it and create replacement faces. So there was a film called The Nightmare Before Christmas. It was a small movie, nobody has ever heard of it. So they did things, they had replacement animation, but they were using sculptor heads. So they would take each head off and they would put each head on, and Jack Skeleton would eventually have a smile or a face or sing a song. But this was all done in the computer. So we would take the animation, we'd animate the faces in the computer to the lip sync, and then we would print them out, and then we would paint every single face. And so I think for Coraline herself, she had 6,300 faces for the movie. And I think the whole movie has 15,000 faces. Individual. And those are all painted by hand. And she has like 8 freckles. So I think one day when Henry Selinger said, "Oh yeah, she should have more freckles." There's somebody going,
Yeah.
so
finished.
how many more? So we did. So for Dad has a mechanical face. You'll notice he has kind of like a long face. You kind of can see the difference. Still really great performances, a lot of subtlety, but it kind of dictates the kind of faces that you can do. With rapid prototyping, with replacements, you can get any expression you want. It's kind of like drawing animation. You can just change it every single time. And so that was the first times replacement printed faces were ever used in a stop motion movie. And then the other thing that we did, because that wasn't enough, was to shoot it in 3D. And so we used stereoscopic, and so it was the first stop motion movie to be made in 3D. And the way that is done is we have a camera. We shoot digitally, so it's basically like an SLR camera. It's like just a high-end digital camera. And it takes a right eye and then it takes a left eye. So for every frame of film, you've got 2 eyes, and the distance between that's moving is basically supposed to be mimicking your actual personal vision. So we shot the whole thing in digital and in 3D, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. When we first started, that was actually in development when I got there, and one of the first things we shot was there's this overscale at the beginning of the movie. You see the Beldam hand kind of like sewing these dolls. It's really creepy. And you see, there's this one shot, the needle coming through a button, and that comes. This is not 3D tonight, but that comes like whoop. Times when we were sitting in the audience while we were trying to work on that, and that thing was like, oh, we're dodging it. It was pretty. So it was a real, and all of our movies ever since have been done in the same manner.
It's just amazing to actually see, that whole operation and be privileged enough to go and see that, but you have explained it very well, I think, too. You have gone from starting in rigging to now becoming the director of practical effects. Can you please explain a little bit about what it is that you do now?
Sure. Now I kind of work with the team that make the puppets. I work with the team that rig the puppets, and I make the team that made the components for the puppets. So I'm kind of in charge of all the assets that need to be animated on stage. So there's the animation team, and then there's the assets that they need to produce the movie. So I'll work with the art department on cars. I'll work with the puppet department on puppets. I'll work with the riggers on trying to get maybe fire into a shot or some kind of special effects. So back when, back in the old days, there was this thing called special effects. And then we had something called visual effects. took over. And visual effects really pertains to things that are built in the computer. So anything that, CG that is made in the computer, that's called visual effects. So practical effects is the kind of the other components to our movie making. So anything that's done physically on set, I'm kind of working behind the scenes on. And the rigging side of that which I was doing on Coraline, is we're really just trying to facilitate the animators' need to move the puppets around in 3D space. So we're building these kind of exoskeletons that can lift the puppet, can roll the puppet, and any other kind of prop or any kind of little attribute that the puppet needs to do needs some sort of external rigging.
Do you miss that sort of day-to-day
Yes,
small stuff?
I do.
Really?
Yeah,
Aw.
yeah, I do. There was like, I'm still working at LAIKA.
Yeah.
So
I know.
I can say that. But so there was a day when I actually got to go on set and do some rigging.
Yeah.
There was like a little bit of desperation, like something needed to happen, and I got out on set and I was like, I can make things happen immediately, and just like it was such. I was like, oh, it's kind of a nice thing. But now I get to work with lots of other people who are making things happen, which is just a completely different sort of thrill.
You and I had a chat before this whole event, and one of the things that excuse me, that we were talking about were some of the sets.
Mm-hmm.
How many sets were there for Coraline?
So there were, I think there were 150 sets. So, and that's not including the environment. So there's environments and then there's sets. So kind of like our puppets, we need duplicates.
Yeah.
So we may be shooting Coraline this way, and then we might be shooting YB going this way. So we need the same set in 2 different locations. So we're building lots and lots of sets. And then we're going to shoot those on lots and lots of units. So a unit is different to a set. A unit is the place where the set lives. And at the time, we were shooting over 52 units. So we have 35 animators working on like 28 Coralines over 52 units. So, and it's like there's not a sound to be heard. But the units are, they're kind of like these curtained off stages where I have a little red light which says you can't go in, and then the animators just are in there, just them and the puppet and the set and the camera. And
Sounds lonely.
so yeah, it's kind of, it's a strange feeling, strange buzz. It's like this quiet storm that's brewing for like 18 months or so.
You talked about the trees and melting the trees,
Mhm.
but you also told me that you did work on the garden.
Oh yeah.
What was the strangest thing that you used in order to create something in the
Oh, I
garden?
think I could guess this one.
There was like,
Dog toys.
everything was strange in the garden. Coraline had this, and Henry, it really stop motion, has this great use of using found objects, right? So, like, because it's all physical stuff, you can actually take something real, and then you can bring it into the world, and you can kind of like, you can paint it, you can change it, you can kind of like make it do this like bespoke little work, and you can turn something that already exists into something new. So we were using things like, there's like horse boning for hats. They turn into flowers. There's kind of like these little mesh tubes, and we kind of like put LEDs in them, and then you turn them inside out, and they turn into flowers. There's popcorn turned into some trees. We made, one of my favorites is there's kind of like the cherry blossoms. And so they were ping pong balls. So there's a ping pong ball with lots of tiny, tiny little holes in them. And then we've got wire, and we push the wire through the holes. And if you bend the wire in just the right way, and we covered the ends of the wires with like a medical bandage, dyed it red, and then you kind of like could suck it in, and it would just like that around the ping pong ball. And then we kind of shot it backwards. And so there's this shot where Coraline, she walks out into the other garden, the fantastic garden, and she just looks at the whole garden just growing before her. So we shot all that backwards with all these ping pong balls with all this bandage, all just sucking into these trees. And we had it all on motors and stuff like that. And there was a dog toy that we used, which was these the squeaky dog toys, but they have like all these little kind of like knobs or nipples kind of things. So we poked wires into the top of those, and then cut them in half and pulled them inside out, and so they would all do that. And so at the time we were just feeding Henry ideas. Just, what about that? What about that? What about that? And he would just go, I like it for that. And the thing about that, I made a lily out of this dog toy, and I was really, really pleased with this lily. I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
So and he's like, oh yeah, that's great. And he goes, it's too big. I was like, well, you can't get dog toys that are this big. So we were able to just use that as a prototype, that then make tiny little silicon versions like this, and then use the same theory, and then just made like hundreds of them. And then so there's a scene where I think Dad is on like this kind of grasshopper tractor going over a bridge, and these pumpkins pop out of the water, and they're surrounded by lily pads and lilies. And so each one of those little lilies that are turning inside out is this little thimble of silica that an animator was underneath the set for, I don't know, weeks, just turning these little knobs all around this pumpkin just to make everything just come alive at the same time.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, that is absolutely, it's astounding when I sit here and I listen to you do all these descriptions, and it seems like such a difficult and time-consuming way of making a film. But what is it that artistry, that aspect of it, what is it that keeps you going into work every day?
Oh yeah, it's that. It's that. That's magic. Like and it's been a part of magic. So it's the sleight of hand, and even though you're like, what's happening, but you can give it to an animator, and then you have for me, I have a mechanical solution, right, or a practical solution, and you give it to an animator, and they give it intent, and they give it thought, and they give it life, and you just is that for real? Like, those things that we just put in a pot and stirred, now living and breathing in front of it, is kind of, that never gets tired. Really. Yeah, that's pretty nice.
All right, well, we want to open it up to questions from the audience. We're going to turn up the house lights on people, and you can get your questions answered. Just a second while they warm up here.
This should be interesting.
What do you guys think so far? Is this pretty amazing stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw you first.
Is there maybe a prequel or a sequel?
You wish. We don't know. There was no prequel. I think the story of actually Coraline itself came when Neil Gaiman was writing it. He wrote it for his children, and I think he wrote it like over 5 years. And I think one child grew up and got too old for the story that he was writing for, so he just kind of like added it onto the next child. And so I don't think there is a prequel at all, and he's never written a sequel. So
there.
I know there's kind of like a lot of stuff on social.
There's a fan movie out too.
Oh, there is?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is
Really?
Stop motion or live action?
No, it's live action. It's called The Other Mother.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it on YouTube?
I believe it is.
I probably shouldn't.
I'm gonna look that up.
I just thought it was interesting. I just discovered it. So anyway, all right. Yes, right up here. Yes.
About how many frames would you be able to shoot in a day?
Ooh, great question.
How many frames would you be able to shoot in a day? She asked.
So we're trying to shoot around about 20 per animator. We're trying to get around about 1.5 minutes of footage a week. So it's slow. Real slow. So yeah, it's
Wait, I'm here. Oh my gosh.
You know, there were times when it was going a bit slower than that. But I think, you know, if we'd be happy with an animator shooting around about 20, 25 frames. And it all depends on the complexity of a shot. It depends on how many characters are in the shot. It depends on if things are working or not, you know. So, you know, but we have a process where we go from blocking to rehearsing to shooting. And so we have blocking, which is shot on 4s. So at LAIKA, we shoot on something called 1s, which we shoot every single frame of footage that you see has some sort of development to the next frame. Some studios are shooting for speed, they're shooting on 2s, so they're shooting every other frame. But when we do blocking, we're probably going to shoot on 4s, so that'll go faster. Then we do rehearsals, which are shot on 2s, and then we're shooting on 1s. So we're trying to, you know, increase the fidelity as we go, but that's, yeah, it's still a pretty slow process.
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about Wildwood?
Yes!
It's gonna be good.
Under wraps for sure, yes.
So, as you have mentioned, stop motion is a very time-consuming way of making a film, and movie making is always a sort of in-the-moment process. What's the longest you spent on something that didn't end up in the movie?
Oh.
Ooh. Cornered them.
All right. So there's a complicated answer to that, right? So it was on Coraline. We worked on a shot of some kind of ribbon-y mice. So there's Coraline's sitting on the bed. She looks at the small door, and then there's a wall. And she sees these ribbon mice appear. So these mice, they must have taken, I reckon, probably took about 6 months to develop. Henry really wanted them to be articulated, so they kind of worked a little bit like, you know, snaps on your jacket or something like that. That's what their joints were, so we could keep them flat. And then they were ribboning, so they had to be suspended. So we built this huge archaic kind of string kind of room. I think there was 4 mice in the shot, and each mouse must have had like about, yeah, I don't know, 10, 12 wires on it. And so they were kind of being pulling around, and so the animator had to kind of like, instead of being able to like move like this, they were kind of like pulling strings to move the thing in between, like the piece of ribbon in between. So it was just this crazy shot. And then this whole thing, so they're kind of like, they're doing this and they're kind of winding around each other. And then they all group together, and we built this huge turbine that all these kind of wires would all attach to. And it started turning, and it all goes to camera. And then they all kind of like group together. I think they all group together, and they all blend. And then they disappear. And this shot, the lady's name that worked on it was called Amy Adamy, right? She's a saint. And she's done the shot. It took, I think, 62 days to shoot this one shot.
Dang.
And we just kept feeding her. We were in over rigging. So we're just like, I just need more of these rigs. And they were kind of like these little, like bobbins that kind of were tensionable. And that you could just like put on these different rigs. And she's like, we're just feeding her these rigs. She's like, I need more articulation, I need more control, this thing's out of control. So we're just feeding her, it takes like 62 days. She does the shot, it looks beautiful. Like everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe it's over. And then I think like a day later, Henry goes, well, we got news. It's not made it. Henry's cut it out of the movie. And we were all like, what? Did you not see it coming? You had 62 days. But it was like, a little bit does remain in the movie. The first half of that shot remains in the movie. But the sweet part of the story is, if you stay to the very end, there's this little Easter egg, which is the whole of the shot with all the rigs and all the wires, and it's like everything that you need you know, and that became the precursor to what we do at the end of every movie from now on. So if you stay to the end of every Leica movie, you'll see a little making of segment. On Paranorman, I think it's the making of a puppet, it's making of Norman.
Oh, yeah.
On Kubo, there's a giant skeleton thing, and so on. And so, in a way, there was just like this really kind of like arduous task that was taken away from us, and this joy, but it gave back almost more so in the way Henry handled it by giving it that kind of little starring role at the end. Good question.
Is there like any backstory on the Belgian, aka Little Mother?
Oh. In what sense? In the character or in the design or?
How she like became who she is, like what's her life backstory?
Oh, I don't know.
Read the book.
I think that's beyond me. I'm sure there is. I'm sure Neil Gaiman has a story about that, but not me. I mean, if you design-wise, you can look at her and think, well, Terry Hatcher does the voice, and not so much the nice mother at the beginning, but the mother that she turns into is a very Terry Hatcher-esque. I think you should probably be proud of that.
They based it off of
There was one over here.
They based it off of a Goliath beetle.
Are there any technical effects that you're really excited that you've been working on recently that haven't maybe been done in some of the past films? You're like, ooh, that's something really exciting we haven't done before to sort of push the boundary.
Ooh, I can talk about Missing Link. I mean, practical effects on Missing Link that I was really excited about was what we've tried to do at Leica is take, stop motion is still by its very nature, right? So nothing's moving. So you'll look at a stop motion film and you might not notice it, but subconsciously you'll kind of, things that, there's no wind in the trees or anything like that. But so at Leica, we've tried to put that in. We've tried to elevate everything that's on the screen. So it just feels like as much like real world as possible. On Missing Link, a good example of that was the stagecoach. So we have there's a kind of a conversation between Adelina, Lionel, and Link in a stagecoach, and the stagecoach is bumping over over like a desert floor. And the desert floor, and they're in the stagecoach, and Chris Butler at the time, who's the director, he wanted to have tassels moving. He said, how many tassels do you want? And he goes, I want tassels all the way around the stagecoach. So we reached 180 tassels moving simultaneously. So, in a way you go, really? But that's what you're waiting for. You're just waiting for a director who just got that vision, who's going to push you and just kind of say, yeah, we're gonna make this, we're gonna sell this as a real life thing. And so that was amazing because we were able to motion control it. We were able to kind of develop it. We shot live action tassels. We learned the way tassels moved, and then we tried to kind of reduce that movement down to something that was mechanical and repeatable. And so we have these kind of little motion control rigs that are just pushing these tiny little wires, kind of like this. And then we had one motion control unit doing these, another motion control unit doing these, and then they're pushing them, and then you just budge them one frame over, and they will just kick out of sequence, and the whole thing just looks like organic motion. And so that kind of thing is just like the stuff that's the stuff that keeps us coming back for more.
Is there anything that you've ever said absolutely no way, or do you just always pivot?
Always go for it. I mean, there are things that we are logistically we would struggle with, right? So stop motions. We've got a big studio. Like back on Coraline, we were running on 52 units. On Missing Link, we were up to nearly 90. We grew the studio, and it's like a fish bowl. It's like we just build the thing again. And so, but still, there's things like background characters. So we do use digital effects a little bit more than we did back on Coraline to fill out the scene, to give it to give the films the proper scale, the stories the scale they deserve. So, and we started doing that around about Paranorman.
Way up in the back.
wondering, out of all the movies that you've had the chance to work on, which one has resonated with you the most personally? Which one would you consider to be the favorite that you've had the chance to work on?
Favorite's a tough word, but I think the ones that kind of like impacted me creatively, like that took, sometimes you just kind of, you just get pulled up, right? There's just like a vacuum where you just have to rise to that occasion. And they all do that in their own ways. But I felt like Coraline and Kubo had that similar flavor for me. That similar, like, we don't know how we're going to do this in a practical, creative way, and then we have to rise to that occasion, right? They're all, and sometimes it's about story, sometimes it's about how many of these things can you do. Missing Link had, I think, 90 different locations. For the art department, that's a huge undertaking. But for kind of practical effects, Coraline and Kubo would kind of had this kind of kinship in the way we were approaching the rigging and the practical effects work.
Right in the middle, rainbow mask.
Barbie, the character, is not in the book. So what's the significance of this character in the movie?
That's a good question.
So the question was, just so everybody could hear, YB is not a character in the book, but a character in the movie. So what is the significance of YB in the film?
So I can't speak for Henry, but what I believe is the reasoning is that because of book, there's a lot of internal dialogue, right? So a character, you can know what they're thinking by just reading what their thoughts. But so Henry wanted that same kind of idea to happen, but on screen. And so YB was created so Coraline could actually express herself to somebody and have a response back. And so he is actually kind of a little bit of us as a reader. He is a little bit of us in the movie. So that's why I think YB was first initiated. And then he gets his own kind of like starring role, saves the day at the end. So he did pretty well.
Okay, there's one over here.
Being the director of practical effects for a movie company that so cherishes and heralds the practical effects side, can you kind of describe the thought process when you have to be like, oh, this idea might be too ambitious, let's go to CGI? Like, what's the give and take on that?
I don't give much. I've been working, so my counterpart is a guy called Steve Emerson. He's the VFX supervisor at the studio. And so we're kind of a little bit like, maybe chalk and cheese, but we're kind of partner in crime at the same time. So when we look at something, we got to the point where we can almost finish each other's sentences about the way we want to approach something. And so we will sit down and we will know what works and what doesn't work. And what's great about Steve is he knows what works for LAIKA. So he knows what our personality is about. He knows what the studio's MO is. And also, Travis Knight is, our guiding force with that. And so he's telling us really what, that I would like to see as much practical work within this scene or within this moment as possible. And so we do have some guidance there. And really, if we can do it, we will do it. That's just basically it. And if we can't do it, it's not a failure. Everybody's tried their best. But we're still trying to influence what the CG becomes. So we still have a hand in it. It's like when, let's say, something like the water on Kubo, or or maybe like the witch cloud in Paranorman. We're still tasked with making maquettes, doing animation tests, all practically. So when things do turn into something that's computer generated, they have that feeling, they have that touchstone of a practical example to go to. So it's as much about that creative process of finding it as it is about sometimes just the end execution. So it's, we never feel left out.
Yeah, right here.
How much like communication did LAIKA have with Neil Gaiman, if any at all, during the creation and execution of Coraline?
Well, us as a studio, or let's studio. Us as creatives we didn't have Neil around at all. But I think, like Henry, that book was sent to Henry before it was even published. And, I think Neil had a lot of admiration for Henry and the way that he worked. And so I think there was a lot of trust in giving it to Henry. And from everything that I've heard, Henry rewrote it and wrote the script for it. And, nibbled and turned it into something that it needed to be. And so I think Neil kind of allowed that to happen. He didn't stand in it. He knew to get out of the way of it as he trusted Henry to move it forward. But I remember doing, Neil coming to the premiere and Neil coming and just turning up and being a part of, part of the phenomena, being around. So there was a lot of love, but they knew what each other's strengths were and what they were giving. And so, I think that is a pretty good marriage in that way.
We had a pretty good crowd for that premiere. It was at the Schnitz. And
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't go to that one.
That was great.
Yeah, I had to go to the English one. Yeah. I heard it was very good. You went to
Yes, Rainbow Max, sorry.
I think there was, yeah. I think there's always hope, right? When you're making something and you're spending that much time on it, you've got so much invested in it that you kind of, and especially that with this movie, you can kind of feel that you're making something special. I didn't think in 15 years' time I would be sitting here talking to you about it now. I can say that. But I thought it was going to be good, and I thought it was going to be successful, I have to say. And to be honest, I think it was a little bit, it's grown in its success over the years. Same way Nightmare did, it's these films, they don't come out, in huge box office at the beginning, but they seem to get under people's skin and they seem to grow and they seem to become part of, culture. And now everybody knows about it. I think the first time I realized how big it was about 3 years ago. I've got a daughter, she was 7 or 8 at the time, and she was playing soccer. And there was a kid on a soccer team, or playing against her, called Coraline. And I could hear the other mom, or the other mother, calling her name. And I was like, oh, this has made it. This is now we're naming kids. And I think that's totally awesome.
Anybody in here named Coraline? No?
No name
No
changes.
Coraline? Okay.
Name changes.
Way up top, red jacket.
The voiceover acting process? How was it? I think it was pretty good. I wasn't around for it, but there was my wife who she works in editorial. She's one of the editors on the movie. So she was lucky enough to watch a movie 3,000 times, I think, during the making of it. And so she was working on a daily basis, listening to Dakota, listening to these voices develop, kind of listening to Dakota age, and then pitching her up a little higher as she was aging. But I think it was, from all that I know, I think it was a really good and healthy, endeavor for the voice talent. I think they all did a really good job. My favorite's Babinski. I actually watched Coraline for the first time in I think, 12 years this week in preparation for this. I kind of try not to go, like, it becomes this memory, right? So it becomes this experience. So I went back and I watched and I was like, oh, whoa, that Babinski is good. And then there was like, and then the Babinski, the evil Babinski, where it's kind of like where they twisted his voice. That's creepy. I was like, oh my God, this is a scary movie. So
No doubt.
I mean, it's great voice talking.
We have time for maybe like one more question, and then we may give you guys a little bathroom break or so before we start the film. So I saw that hand up there, top right, for me anyway.
It's a like two-part question. How did you film the fog scene, and what's the most difficult effects you ever worked on?
Oh, okay. So fog scene, that's live action. So we, our VFX supervisor at the time was a guy called Brian Van Holt, and he recreated the whole set that you see, but with black velvet, and then took dry ice and just kind of like poured it over the black velvet, and so the footage is fantastic. And then they just then you've got a really high contrast kind of comp between black and white. And then they eradicated all the black, and then they were able to put all that dry ice back over the sets. So we had like these black versions of all the sets, and that's how they did. And it's really cool. And then there'd be like, you don't have to apologize, that's me. So there's these kind of like little wisps that you see, and so they would just shoot these tiny little, like, on the set, they would just like go in there and you just see like these people with like little straws. Just little wisps of dry ice or fanning it, just trying to get it to move in just the right way. Like Wybie will lift his hand and there'll be a little kind of jetty that kind of falls off his hand and stuff like that. What was the second part?
What was the most difficult effect you ever worked on?
So difficult effect would probably be the skeleton on Cuba.
Yes.
That was pretty nuts. And so the skeleton, we cut it in half. If it was standing, it would have been 16 feet. And we actually had the top half on what is called a hexapod, which is a kind of like a flight simulator. It's motion controlled. It has like 6 actuators, and it can move up, down, left, right. It kind of moves it any way you want. So this giant kind of almost like 10-foot torso sitting on a hexapod, and then you've just got like animators just like 20 foot in the air animating it, and we had our studio's not too dissimilar to this in terms of height, and we had wires that were going all the way to the top that were it's like a giant marionette that were going over to buckets of sand that we were able to kind of like motion control into position. And so that was probably kind of the most death-defying and hardest effects that we've probably produced in the studio.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for all of your amazing questions. I'm sorry that we ran out of time for some of you. Thank you, Ollie Jones, for being here tonight and talking to us about Coraline and everything else LAIKA.
Thank you, Mary. Fantastic. And thank you, Mary. Thank you. Enjoy the movie.
Yes. Worth the drive.